Good morning. I want to talk today about an image or a metaphor that I find really helpful in um, practicing meditation, in learning about what meditation is and what some of the instructions mean. Because, particularly when we're starting out with meditation, there are all of these ideas about equanimity and stability and letting things be, observing, noting, um, and it can just get a bit overwhelming, particularly at the beginning. So I have this image of a glass of water, and uh, there's a couple of aspects to this image that uh, I find really helpful. Um, and yeah, this is useful for starting out and kind of establishing a practice, but I think it's also useful uh, as the practice matures and settles. So the first idea that I think is, or the first concept that I think is really helpful is that um, with the practice of equanimity, with the practice of calm abiding, of stillness, of insight, we aren't looking to change anything. And yet, uh, if you practice meditation, things change. I remember when I was really first starting and I was going around different groups, and I sat in a Zen group that I liked. Uh, and I asked the teacher, I said, well, surely there's a difference when I sit here and when you sit there, or when the Dalai Lama sits wherever he's sitting. There must be a difference. And the teacher's answer was, no, there isn't. But that doesn't help me, because there is, right? There is a difference. Otherwise, okay, so what is that difference, right? What is that difference? Um, it's a difference of perspective and orientation. And so here, start with this. Start with the idea of a glass of water. I have a mug of tea here, but let's say this was a glass of water. If I'd thought ahead, I actually would have brought up a glass of water. But let's say it's a tall glass of water, and the water that's in it is dirty. It's filled with dust or particles or um, rocks or pebbles or whatever. And as you spin it, all of those are mixed up, and you couldn't drink that water, right? It's dirty, it's swirling around, and it's partly swirling because I'm continuing to swirl it. So the first thing that we do when we sit and we meditate is we are resting the glass of water. Right? When we take the pose, um, to whatever degree we're able to achieve that, the points of the pose, right? A comfortable, balanced, alert pose. That is putting the glass down. Well, what happens when you put the glass down? The first thing that happens is there's no more energy introduced to the swirling. So gradually, the water stops spinning and um, eventually settles, becomes still. Right now, you have a glass of water that's still. The particles in that still water will precipitate out. Is that the right word? They will settle down to the bottom. And after a certain amount of time, and depending on the kind of particles and um, how heavy they are, or how light they are, or how mixed up they are, eventually they will all settle to the bottom. Now you have a glass of water, and everything that was in there before is still there. But now you have the cool, clear, drinkable water on the top and the settled particulates in the bottom. And I like this because when you take the pose and we are looking to reach a stable mind, uh, the direction is to pay attention to an object, like the breath, and to observe when you are distracted. And then when you recognize that you're distracted, return back to the breath. And you can be distracted by a thought or an emotion or a physical sensation or an external phenomenon like someone clicking their fingers or coughing or a bus going by or a dog barking. Uh, all of those, in one way, are uh, equal. They're equal perturbations of awareness. And what we're trying to do in sort of the foundational practice of calm abiding is to cease the continuing attachment to those thoughts. They'll still be there. This practice isn't about no thought, no sensation, no experience. It's about uh, equanimous viewing of those sensations and those phenomena. So you sit, and gradually, the first thing that happens when you sit is you recognize the volume of noise in the mind, just as when you first put the glass down. What becomes apparent is how dirty and turbulent it is. So that all settles down. But going back to what I said at the beginning, nothing has changed, right? The content of that glass of water is unchanged. What has changed is the relationship between the water, the wetness of the water, and the particles, and the particular nature of the particles. So that's nice, right? That's a nice sensation as you sit. It's a change, and yet it's not a change. Now, I was using this metaphor a few weeks ago, and someone asked about emotions, which feel more compelling and more all-encompassing than a thought. So, yeah, on the one hand, an emotion is, as it arises, has the same lack of inherent being as a thought or a sensation, but it can feel a bit more ingrained. And so I started to think, well, maybe this glass metaphor can be extended. And so we've got a glass of water with bits of dirt in it that's settled down. But maybe the glass itself has something smeared on it, some lipstick or some greasy fingerprints. Those aren't removed just by sitting. You become aware of them. Maybe you can see around them. But you need to wipe the glass clean, right? And this is where some of the karmic cleansing practices, some of the mantra practices, some of the visualization work in Bon, in Tibetan Buddhism, but in the Bon that I'm familiar with, we practice chud, which is a quite elaborate practice, but at its core, it's cutting the connection to the ego, cutting the connection to those karmic traces. But all of the foundational practices include some idea of not just letting things be as they are, but also removing karmic obscurations. So I like adding that into this metaphor as well. I think it's helpful. I'm pausing for a minute because there is a different approach where you recognize in a flash the clear nature of the water, and then the practices are to stabilize and promote that, rather than how I'm describing it here, which is sort of an incremental approach. But this is how my practice tends to be, and I think it's a helpful way to think about things. But remember that everything I'm saying is one view on a very multifaceted set of teachings. And if you have a different experience or a different teaching, then undoubtedly those are equally true, probably, right? So then I was thinking, well, what's next? I mean, what's next then is realizing that the cup or the glass itself is not boundaried, right? Where does the glass end? If you get to a point where stability is mature and recognition of the nature of thought and perception is more and more precise, the nature of the glass itself becomes, if you scrutinize the glass at a certain point, like if you look at the glass under an electron microscope, right, which is essentially what meditation is, it's refining the window of perception smaller and smaller, so that you get to a point where the glass itself is atoms in space, right? Or electrons and neutrons and nuclei and things like that. Uh, which is where I think there is a truth that meditation and awareness and quantum physics align. They'll overlap because there's this increasingly refined window of noticing that happens during meditation. And so at a certain point, the glass, which is your practice, which is the body and the mind, uh, uh, no longer have a separate, right? And so the perception shifts from the glass and the water to like the table that the glass is on, and the room that the table is in, and the house that the room is in, and the planet that the house is on, and extending out and out until you have this uh, sort of profligate awareness of process, right? Uh, and so you still have the glass. There's nothing saying that the glass doesn't respond like this, but just as your awareness of the water and the particles has changed as they settle, then the connection to the idea of the glass changes as well. So I think it's quite a helpful image for constructing a practice. So let me know if you have any questions. Those of you who've watched this channel for a while are noticing two things. One, I am indeed growing my mustache. I'm going to grow it until my birthday, which is in April, which at this point is about 10 weeks away, and see what it looks like, right? And also I'm recording the other way from, usually I sit at the desk behind me with the camera pointing this way. But I've shifted. I've got this new microphone which hooks into my audio interface, which happens to be there. Here's the same piano, right? So hopefully this is sounding a little bit better because it's a slight upgrade on the microphone. So let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think about the image. Let me know what you think about the mustache. Polite comments only, even if you're negative. And what about this awesome microphone? So keep your wits about you.